So hi, my name is Darcey Gans. I am a member of the education team at Borough Land Trust. Specifically, I am the conservation education specialist. It's my first year with Borough, and I'm an AmeriCorps member, it's a service term. So I'm focusing on how I can assist the community in my work. Um, so a little about me. I actually went to the University of Minnesota. Go Gophers. And my background is in wildlife and conservation biology. I've loved animals since I was a little kid. And I really want to do a lot of work with them as a career. Let me get my words out. And I graduated this past spring with a BS in conservation biology with dual minors in communications and animal behavior, because I love education and I love being able to talk about wildlife and getting others as excited as I am about it.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Lydia. Darcey and I work together at Borough Land Trust. I'm also an AmeriCorps member. I'm serving my second year now as a natural resource education leader. It's been a couple years since I've been in school. Hard to believe I graduated about 3 years ago. My background is generally in environmental science and also geographic information science. Um, Really, I found my passion for outdoor education when I came to Borough Land Trust as an AmeriCorps member. So I really love to promote connections with nature and outdoor activities. I'm really, really excited to do this type of education as well. Darcey has been teaching me so much about nest boxes. She's kind of our go-to expert here. So we are very, very excited to talk to you about this today.
You can just call me a wildlife nerd, Lydia. It's okay. That's what I am. Um, and a quick note, just because even though we are AmeriCorps members, we do serve with Borough Land Trust. If you don't know, Borough Land Trust is a local land trust based in Iowa City with what is it, Lydia? Over 10 properties, 12 properties that we have now.
Yep. Yeah. So we're getting up there. We're at about 13 official properties.
13 official properties, spread kind of in Johnson County and in the surrounding area. And the focus of our work here is really to not protect, I don't want to say refurbish. I'm trying to think of the correct word because it's not furniture. To protect, like restore, that's the one, and spread knowledge and stewardship. And that means kind of the care of the land of spaces that are kind of local to here. And that's kind of the backbone of our work. So moving on. Also, we're very excited to tell you that this is a very timely workshop. It is National Nest Box Week, and the best way to celebrate that is finding out more about nest boxes and putting one up if you can. So technically it doesn't start till this Sunday, because it always starts on Valentine's Day, because, you're pairing up, birds are pairing up right now. It's a great time to make a nest box, spread that love around. So we just want to you can find out more at nestboxweek.com. It was originally a British program that was started that's now in the US. And they have a bunch of really great resources on nest boxes to check out. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And this is just kind of giving you a quick overview of what we'll be going through today. We wanted to really make sure that, we went through not only the kind of the biology of behind why do nest boxes, what it has to do with migration, why it's valuable to the local birds, and then kind of the ins and outs of what it means to build a bird box and also about maintaining it. So just wanted to give you an idea.
Yes, and I am going to send out a link in the chat. If we could maybe take just a minute for everyone to complete this quick poll. We want to get an idea of where people are, where their interests lie at this workshop. We know there's about 31 participants on this call, and I know you all come from various backgrounds, various interests. So we would just like to know a little bit more about our audience. And we'll go about a minute for that. All right. So I think if everyone is comfortable with moving on, looks like a lot of you guys, this is your hobby or professional interest. And a lot of you also are exploring a topic that is completely new to you. So that is super awesome. We're very, very glad to have you, and super glad to be a source of information for those for which this is a hobby. So awesome. I think we can go ahead and move on, Darcey.
There we go. That was a fun bit of experimentation for me. So what I like to think of when I think of Iowa and birding is I think of the Mississippi Flyway. And what that really means is that Iowa is kind of a tourist trap. I said in this description of the event, but I think it's a good way to think of it because when we go on vacation, what we're looking for is someplace that we can relax. Like you want, that whole ideal of, you're going to have your meals brought to you on a platter. Now, obviously that's not happening for birds, but we talk about flyways. We're talking about areas that are specific paths in the country where they're going to generally find habitats that are really beneficial for birds as they make their way either north or south, depending on whether it's the fall or spring migration for food. So Iowa, you can see, is smack dab in the Mississippi Flyway. And these are all, like, there's multiple corridors. And you can kind of see how, like, what a big draw from all different areas the flyway can be in kind of the photo on the right. But the whole idea is that Iowa is actually really important to migrating birds. I think that people often think the state's mostly developed, but historically, what's great about Iowa is that it has a lot of prairies, which that's like the all-you-can-eat buffet of birds, pretty much, because there's tons of insects, there's tons of seeds, flowers, all different things, great places to shelter or build a nest. And there's all, we have wetlands and forests as well, but not as prominent, all great places for birds to utilize. All great birds. Whoops, sorry. I did not mean to do that. All great places for birds to stop on their way, either north or south, and to potentially build nests. So while you may not think of Iowa as a great place for birds, it actually is really important. Oops. And so, but the problem is we're in a housing shortage here and all over the country and world, honestly, because we're seeing a lot of habitat loss for these species. And while this is affecting pretty much all birds and honestly most living things besides us, it's really problematic specifically for cavity nesting birds. And those are birds that would specifically use like a hollow of a tree to build their nest. And that's a large portion of birds that exist. Now there are, like, we're going to go into it later. There also are you can make nest boxes for birds that may nest on cliffs or also might nest on kind of platform nesting, like on the top of a tree, like an eagle or a heron. But again, same thing of like, there's less trees that are going to be available to them because it takes about 80 years for a tree to begin to even form a hollow, like 80 years of the tree being alive. Then it's another 300 years for that hollow to grow large enough for it to even be usable to even small birds. And so that's what we're talking about. We're thinking of old growth forest. Old growth trees are going to have these older trees. But the problem is that we've lost a lot of that forest through logging, through just urban expansion. We're not seeing as much of those trees present. Even from the derecho, took out a ton of old growth trees. That's going to take hundreds of years to replace. And they're simply like, for the amount of birds there are, we're not growing trees fast enough to replace that need for them. So there are a lot of birds who just literally are house hunting and not finding anything where there historically was plenty. So I want to be clear. Nest boxes, as you're here because you're excited and you want to help birds, at the end of the day, what we would want ideally for birds and what birds would prefer is to have a tree that had a hollow in it for them to use. They would always prefer to have a natural nest box. And, we would prefer to have those natural spaces for them. And if given the choice, I can say almost all birds that are cavity nesters will pick a cavity over a nest box if given the choice. But since, like I said, we're not replenishing them as fast as we're not replenishing nest cavities as quickly as they're being taken away. So nest boxes do help fill that gap. And hence the title also of this presentation, the next best thing, because nest boxes aren't ideal. Now, the great thing is like, so as Lydia described, we want to kind of test our audience, see who we have here. We're going to talk about a program called NestWatch. And I want to also be clear, you do not have to do this. Like, you can build a nest box and not have anything to do with NestWatch. It's just it can be a way to make what you're doing even more impactful. And again, it's what I love about it is it's what we consider to be community science, which is that people who don't necessarily have a background in science or wildlife are able to or really in anything. It can be in ecology, astronomy, all different types of things. They're able to contribute to professional academic science experiments. And so the NestWatch is a perfectly good example because you can be an amateur birder or have a serious hobby or scientist, and you can be helping the conservation of birds. And so NestWatch was started by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology as an offshoot extension program about 10 years ago. And it's really designed to track the status and trends of the reproductive biology of birds and just how those populations are changing, especially if we see a lot of things like new invasive species, climate change, like habitat loss. It's really important that we be able to monitor these populations. And when I say this program has been around a while and you can make a difference, well, one data point doesn't make a difference. But when you've monitored 100,000 nests total, when you're getting approximately almost 6,000 new data on 6,000 new nests, and they're continually growing participants, you're getting a lot of data that actually has been used in research and conservation with birds. And so you're like, okay, but I just came here to build like a cute little birdhouse. So why are you talking about science? I didn't come here for that. Well, I hope you came here for that because I love science. But the reason that it's really powerful to be able to get data from a nest box, in monitoring it, is because birds are bioindicators. And by that, I mean, they really reflect the health of the ecosystem and habitat that they're in. That's because they're really widespread. They're most bird populations are spread in large sections of the country, and a lot of them are able to adapt to inhabit multiple types of ecosystems, in areas, even as a single species. And when they're in this variety of ecosystems, they're playing a lot of different roles, everything from serving as prey to other animals to helping to spread seeds and pollen, all different things, managing insect and pest populations. So we can actually find out a lot about not just about how this specific species is doing, but how well our environment is doing. How is this changing? What can we correlate that with? And like I said, the great thing about birds is people love birds, and people are very observant. It's easy to observe a bird and report that data and say, I saw this bird here and I know it was this bird. And you can do that pretty much from day one of birding all the way through being a professional birder.
So going along with NestWatch, highly recommend checking out NestWatch, even if you're not particularly interested in participating in the community science aspect of it. But if you are thinking of doing NestWatch, and we do recommend it because it's really fun, there are a couple of considerations and kind of lots of do's and don'ts that you should be definitely aware of. And I have this big, large red text so that it is burned into your mind, and you are going to see it when you close your eyes and when you sleep, because the safety and well-being of birds is absolutely priority number one. That is what this code of conduct is all about. And even if you're not necessarily wanting to participate in NestWatch, some of these are very applicable to observing nests and to also going in and out to maintain your nest box and putting up a nest box as well. So couple of these we can just go through really quickly. Choosing appropriate times to visit nest is one of those code of conduct things. You do not want your friends coming up to your house, ringing your doorbell at 2, 3 a.m. Not appropriate, right? That would be very annoying. It is very annoying for birds as well. Don't disturb them when they're trying to get ready to just quiet down for the night, and don't disturb them really, really early in the morning. So kind of those things to take into account. And then also avoid leading predators to a nest, really, really important point. We have this nice illustration on the right here that is showing you that you are not supposed to leave a dead end trail to a nest box. So even if you are participating in the community science aspect of it and you're wanting to go up to this nest box, or if you're putting up your nest box, you are just coming in to check on it, maybe doing some maintenance, don't leave a dead end trail. You may not think that blue jays or other predators are smart enough to watch you, but they actually are. And as soon as you leave that nest, they are coming right to that nest box. And if there's something in there, you'll be leading them right to those chicks, or right to the parent bird that is going to be stressed out that now there's a predator around. So it's a really good illustration of not leaving a dead end trail. So code of conduct is really awesome because, so we've included a link down at the bottom here. You can actually read through kind of more of the details of what it means and then get certified, certified in this code of conduct. So you're really kind of testing your understanding and also then kind of getting that certification that, okay, yes, I do know what I'm doing and I can do it correctly. Another thing about nest boxes that you absolutely want to minimize disturbance and keep your visits very brief. One really good way to do this is that if you're participating in NestWatch, going up to the nest box, pulling out your phone really, really quick, snapping a picture, obviously with the flash off, and then moving on, going about your day. So keeping your visit basically to less than 20 seconds. That's really, really important to minimize stress to the birds, because it's very stressful when you have a person around your nursery basically in your home all the time, creating attention to that nest for one, and also preventing maybe the parent bird from attending to its chicks. So go ahead and do that link if you are really interested in get certified. It's a really great way to add some more knowledge under your belt.
And I just want to add on a couple of things to what Lydia said. One that I forgot to mention is if you want to participate in NestWatch, and like, let's say you don't necessarily get an active nest box, which we'll get in later, they also would love data of just wild birds. If you can, again, without disrupting those birds, like if you're able to observe a wild nest, they will happily accept that data. And also it's not an official certification that Lydia mentioned. Like you're not, but you can print out the certificate, but I really strongly recommend it because honestly, that was one of the first things I did when I was starting to plan out this presentation, was take that code of conduct, and I in many ways based my presentation off the principles. Well, our presentation off the principles in the code of conduct. So like that's the level of importance. I know it's really not that long. It'll take you 20 minutes, but it's just really good to keep in mind. Okay. And no, we mean it. The health and safety of the birds comes first. So I think this is true of people and of animals a lot of the time. Is it's very exciting to be like, oh, I want to interact with that animal. Like I want a picture with that animal. I want a picture of that animal. Like, and I think of it really as the difference of like, you're thinking about you. You're like, I understand you want that experience, but like, I promise you that I didn't get into wildlife just so I could touch cool animals. That's pretty much how you become Joe Exotic, in my opinion. It's about remembering that if you're gonna go for the nest box and actually try to monitor them and risk disturbing them, You're there because you need to get that, you want data. You want to protect that species and help them survive long term. And I'm not saying don't observe those birds like from a distance. Don't like enjoy that nest box and potentially the interaction, potentially getting to observe the growth of like one of the most amazing things in nature. I'm just saying, please always put the safety of the birds first before you think I should really touch one of those chicks to see how fluffy they are, because I know it's tempting. They're very fluffy looking. But just to reiterate, safety first and last and always, says Montgomery Bird. So keep it in mind. Now, when we talk about nest boxes, there's the great thing about nested boxes is there's a lot of different kinds. And that's because birds make a lot of different types of nests, like I said. So you can pretty much like, just comes in an insane variety of shapes. You can see this one up here for a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcons tend to nest on kind of shelf-like ridges on cliffs. So you're gonna wanna give them a shelf-like box. Bluebirds are classic cavity nesters. And so they're gonna really enjoy a box. It's gonna kind of mimic that dip, like the hollow of a tree. Robins tend to nest on ledges of trees or branch ledges. So you're gonna have more shelf-like box. And profanatory, I always forget how to pronounce this, warblers, cavity nesters, but this is just a really smart alternative way to make that same type of nest. And no, I mean it, there's a lot of different types of nest boxes. I actually had to narrow down the images. Like I said, you can nest on a platform, like ospreys, like will nest on a platform. You can have it be in the middle of a pond, like this merganser. Or also like for loons that like to nest generally on like marshy soil, you can make them a little raft. We're not going to go through how to build these types of nest boxes, but I just think it's good to keep in mind that there's just a lot of different options. And when I talk about there being a lot of different options, that's because there's a lot of different types of birds. And so when it comes to, you might think, oh God, what do I do? I want to do it, but like, I want to make sure I pick the right thing. It's kind of three things to keep in mind. It's like, where are you? So we're in the Midwest, so think that area. And what's habitat that you have by you where you could put a nest box on? So if your property, if you butt up right against a creek or a pond, you might be a really good option to put up a box for a marsh bird or a bird that likes to be near water. However, if you're pretty landlocked in a mostly grassland area, don't do that. You probably aren't going to get a bird that way. So really think about what type of habitat you have that you can provide to a bird. And like I said, different birds, different nests. So think about what species you would potentially be interested to target. So, if you want to focus more on songbirds rather than a raptor, thinking of that, like you can have options within that habitat that you have. And also many nest boxes attract multiple different types of birds, so you might get a variety of options. And then it's also important to keep in mind the difficulty of making that box. I can, no one, I don't recommend you take on making a really complicated box, get frustrated and stop, because that's a lot of time and energy to waste, a lot of resources to waste. And that's not the point. Our point is to find, if you want to challenge yourself, that's great. But if you want to go for an easier box, do it. Just make sure that you're using your time and resources well. And I don't want anyone to come out of this like, she lied. I hated this process. It was terrible. Like, just be aware. And so NestWatch, which I'm going to tell you, we used a lot of resources from NestWatch because they've just done a great job of making like the process of creating NestBox really great. So they have a page called Right Bird, Right House, and there's a link right here. And what you'll do is you're going to go. So I live in the Great Lakes region. So I selected my region and I selected my habitat. And then I get this great list of all these different birds that I can do. Some of these they'll mark as kid friendly in making, and see they rank the complexity. And the great thing is if you click on this, you not only will be able to get a blueprint and instructions for how to build it, but best places to put the nest box. Like, should it be on a pole? Can you put it on a house? Or is it better to put it on a tree? Like, I'm still discovering awesome features about this, but I cannot recommend it enough. Like, I can't imagine any other way I'd pick a nest box because it's just so interactive and fun this way. So should you put up a nest box? Well, excuse me, when should you put up a nest box? So there are people who be like, you absolutely have to put it up in the fall. Like you can't even consider doing it later than that. Um, Not really true. There's kind of no I can't there's not really a great time, like, an absolute best time of year to put up a box. It's gonna partially depend on the species and when they'll start picking out nests anyway. But if I had to pick a time that's gonna generally be better, people or actually, if I wanna say if I could, people often recommend you do it in the fall because it's often how you have the opportunity for birds that are around that are roosting in the winter or are migrating really early and looking for nests to see that box. And if they're using it for winter roosting refuges, they're more likely to use it for nesting in the spring. However, I promise I did not say let's do a nest box workshop when it was already way too late for you to put up a nest box. I wouldn't do that to you, beautiful people. Um, like you can put up a nest box. February is a perfect time because you still have a lot of birds that are still looking for nests that have are still migrating into Iowa. So pretty much even into early March, you can put up a box and potentially get some birds. However, I'm not a magician and I have to be honest, I'm a scientist. You may not get birds the first year or maybe even the first few years a box is up. And I'm sorry if that happens to you. It's frustrating. Believe me, a lot of wildlife work is hoping something will be there and then continually not finding it. Believe me, I've been in the middle of Indiana looking for bats that way. It's frustrating at times. But, big but, don't give up. Like, if not now, like you can all like if not this year, like birds aren't everywhere. Maybe you made the best barn owl nest box you could. Like that thing is high quality $1 million level barn owl nest box. Well, maybe you didn't have a barn owl in the area. Like that's just birds aren't everywhere. So maybe next year one will be there. So don't give up. It's just kind of all circumstance. And, maybe it was the location. So you can always try something new. But just don't be like, this entire nest box concept is bunk. I won't do this ever again. Like, just because you don't get a bird the first year. So stay determined.
All right. So location. One of the things that you want to keep in mind and evaluate is what do you have around your home? As Darcy mentioned earlier, this is going to be really important in picking the type of box and also choosing the type of species that you want to target. So think about what you have around your home. Is there a lot of noise and disturbance all around? Is there lots and lots of foot traffic everywhere all the time? Is there lots of cars going through, semis? Is it really loud? Are you really close to your neighbors on all sides? So, and then also, do you have the space to place the nest box kind of far away from these disturbances and stressors? So you really need to evaluate what you have around your home and then take that information and use NestWatch if you want to. Maybe some of you are kind of familiar and experts on how to do this, but NestBox really has that really good tool where you can put in what you have around you, and then it'll tell you, what species that may be good for. And yeah, you need to think about what species you'd like to attract or what species are going to come to that nest box. So, like Darcy said, if you live in a very urban area, you might not want to build a box that's for owls because you're not going to find owls there. Or you might not want to build a box that's for birds that like to be near water if you don't have any water. And birds are very picky about where they like to be. And so you need to keep that in mind. Sometimes, we hope to really build a great box for this one species, but you're just not in their area, and that's okay. Even if you are in a very urban area, you can still kind of input that into the link that we were just talking about, and it'll tell you, it'll give you some information about what you can do. So it's not like you need to have 10 acres of property for your nest box project. It's really not the case. You can find birds that are going to be fine with a little, with some, with some noise around them, with some disturbances. So it's okay if you don't have a lots of land around you, you can still make it work. And then also, you definitely want to avoid areas wherever you are. Try and really avoid areas where herbicides and pesticides are used. So this is not only a health issue for the birds, it's really gonna kind of lower their food supply by a significant amount. So if you're using pesticides, you're gonna get rid of those nice beneficial insects that parent birds really need to feed their young and themselves. About 200 to 300 caterpillars are needed for a bird when they're raising young. That is per bird. So that is a whole lot of caterpillars. And that if you're using pesticides and herbicides, those caterpillars are not going to be there. They're not going to be in your area at all. So keep that in mind. And just because you're not using herbicides and pesticides may not mean that your neighbor across the street isn't, or your neighbor next door isn't, and that might really affect insect populations as well. So keep that in mind. And like we talked about, placing as far away from disturbed areas as possible. And what you can also do if you're kind of thinking about a longer term project is make your backyard or front yard into more of a little bit of a wilder place with some native plantings. So that's really going to help bring those beneficial insects back as well. It's going to provide a space for some ground nesting birds if you really have kind of bushy areas, if you really are starting to get kind of a wild backyard. So native landscaping is really, really awesome as well to support native populations. And we have, there's lots of resources on that. And on BurrockLandTrust.org, actually, we have plenty of resources on how you can get started with native landscaping.
And just to kind of add to what Lydia said, 'cause she did a great job. Like she was saying, it's really going to depend on the bird. So like you can't. There is a section on like the NestWatch site, like the Right Bird, Right House. And again, you don't even have to participate in NestWatch to use these resources. If you just want to figure out the right house, like if you go to the section that says town, there are some bird houses that you can stick right on the side of a house or pretty close to a house and it will work. Just make sure you're checking to see if that's effective. And the other thing is, and I'm sorry, this is such a nitpicky bird nerd thing to say, but there are owls in urban areas. To Lydia, specifically in Iowa City, you're going to get barred owls, great horned owls, and screech owls. And actually, screech owls are a great nest bug species. They're very willing to go in and raise their chicks in, or their owlets, excuse me, in a nest box. So I'm sorry, that was nitpicky, but I just needed to say that. So,
And that's why you're our bird expert, Darcy. You know all the facts. Another thing is try and position the box in shade or shade of buildings or trees. When you have a box that's standing in sunlight all the time, constantly, and especially in strong sunlight, that box is going to get really, really hot and uncomfortable for birds. I mean, think about being in a car on a really, really hot day with no AC and the car is not running. So it may not get that extreme, but that's kind of what we're talking about. And that's pretty uncomfortable, I think, for anyone. And so the box doesn't have to be in complete sunlight and it shouldn't be in complete shade because that can get very cold. So try and find a place that is maybe very sunny in the morning and then shady in the afternoon. That would be perfect. Or if you are not looking to do that, don't have trees very much or buildings, you can face the box between north and east. You're avoiding the strong sunlight and the wettest winds, which tend to come from the north and east in Iowa. All right, so let's talk about some features of a very good nest box. A lot of these, if you think about it, is basically what you want in your own home and what you have in your own home to make you very comfortable and happy in where you live. So things like drainage holes. So in our houses, we have drainage, we have pipes. Uh, the bathroom has pipes for our waste. Our kitchen has, pipes that lead the dirty dishwasher. So drainage holes, right? Ventilation, thick walls, sloped roof. So that is to, if it's raining, so water can just slide right off instead of sitting on the top of that box. The right entrance size. So most of us, we build doors on our houses that are not for people who are 8 feet tall. They're for regular average sized people, because you don't need a door that's for a giant, right? And we don't build doors that are way smaller that for someone that's 2 feet tall. So right entrance size is a big part, plays a big part in actually a lot of things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Our recessed floor, they recommend about 1/4 up from the bottom of that nest box. So that's going to keep the nest from being wet. And then a hinged door. So that's more of like a maintenance thing. And Darcey, if you look at Darcey's screen right now, she's showing a nest box with a hinged door. So it opens up really nicely so that you can, if you're observing the nest box, if you're cleaning it out, doing some sort of maintenance, it just opens right up really easily. So that's what we mean by a hinged door. Perfect. Another thing you want to pay attention to is using galvanized screws. This may seem nitpicky, but it's really not, because regular nails will weather and they will come out. They're just not very good for this type of project where you need this to last. There's no point in building something if it's going to last a couple months. So using galvanized screws, that is going to be your best bet. And then we have rough interior walls, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in the next slide. So, well, maybe not the next slide, but this is a super important illustration as well. This comes from NestWatch, beautiful illustration showing how to find the correct entrance size for the right bird. So you really don't want to create a hole that is like, well, I'm just going to guess and create this large hole so that pretty much any bird can go into it. You should definitely try and avoid that and use this illustration to help you pick the right entrance size, because the right entrance size should be just perfect enough, just small enough that the bird can fit through it. And then larger predators will not be able to fit through it. So that's really the point of that. And it has some awesome guides for you, like a northern flicker here in the bright orange, 2.5 inches, a screech owl, 3 inches. So really great guide for that.
And just to add on, because I know Lydia will be getting into this in a bit, but if you want to avoid invasive species like house sparrows and European starlings, some of these birds are going to require holes that are going to have to be a minimum size that will allow these kind of unwanted species to enter. Like, I can promise you a great horned owl is going to need a bigger hole than just like your out then that will allow European starlings and house sparrows in. But for other ones, if you can make it just small enough they can't enter, then you don't have to worry about some nest competitors, which is always nice, because who doesn't want to worry less?
Yeah, and this is what we mentioned earlier, roughen the surface or add wire for chicks to climb up. A really easy way to do this on the inside of the nest box, on the front panel there, is to just use some sandpaper and quickly roughen that surface. When chicks are really young, they have those nice sharp claws, and it's really going to help them dig in when they're trying to climb up instead of kind of a slick, shiny wood surface. You can also create notches as well. And for ducks, a great way to do this is to add a mesh material on the inside.
So, and again, don't have to do this. But if you do choose, you're like, yeah, I do want to have data that I'm entering. So a couple different venues to do it. You're gonna need to ultimately submit it electronically, either through the NestWatch site or you can have an app. Um, that's their app symbol. If you're like me and you like writing things down first, and you want to make sure you get all the info that you need, well, like write it down as quickly as possible. They have this great nest check data sheet that you can also access from the website. So there's just a lot of different options to be able to get that data in if you choose to. And just because we know not all of you are going to do this, if you really want to do like some nest monitoring, which I 10 out of 10 recommend, if I could like is whenever to contribute to like conservation, I think that's exciting. You're literally contributing to like actual nationwide important conservation science. So yay. Again, not a requirement. There's like to cover all that we're not going to get to, check the manual. There's a link below. This stuff is all listed throughout the NestBox site, but the NestWatch site. But you can like, this is just a great specific, like comprehensive list. They'll get you on all the points that most of the ones we touch and also give you more detail to inform you. And then again, not spending too much time on this. So this is kind of a very generalized idea of what's going to happen. So let's say you either find a wild nest, or if you do choose to enter data, I mean, if you find a wild nest or you do see or you do get birds nesting in your box, you're going to start by trying to get as exact as you can what location you saw that nest, like latitude and longitude if you can. You can drag it on Google Map style thing. And you're going to mark that as a nest site, and then you're going to say nesting attempt. Now we say nesting attempt because not every nest is successful. Maybe the parent, like maybe the eggs didn't hatch, maybe a parent was killed. There's a lot of reasons the nest might fail, but assuming that, like, and if that was true, you would go straight to the step, like, this nest failed. We didn't see it succeed. So, but if it is successful, then you'll go and you'll monitor it periodically, like every 3 to 4 days, mark down that data, enter it in. And then once all the birds have fledged, then you'll say that this is completed. Lid.
So another way that you can get a little bit more out of your nest box experience is to add a camera to your box. Now, this can get pretty complicated and convoluted because there are so many ways to do this, and it's so awesome to be able to observe bird behavior in their life cycle this way. I'm definitely jealous of people who can do this because it's so awesome, and I would just be honestly, I would be watching it all the time. I feel like I would never get anything done because it's just so cool. But it absolutely must be done properly because if you remember, our big bold sign is the health and safety and well-being comes first. There's a lot of nitpicky things that must be taken into consideration when you're adding a camera. Like, for example, don't put a camera in that's going to require you to constantly change out the batteries and create a disturbance to that nest. You have to think about wires, think about range. So there's this awesome link down at the bottom that will tell you all about the right way to add a camera to a box. Highly recommend if you can do this properly.
I hate to burst this bubble, but like I tried to warn you with that you might not get birds. There are also just some things that you might run into, like that might be a little troubling for you when you're doing when you're having a nest box. And most of them are pretty straightforward to address. So don't freak out. Don't think like, oh God, this is a severe responsibility I have to take on. I promise you, this will be okay. So we're going to just take you through some of the things that you might happen and how to tackle them. So one thing is if a chick falls out of the nest, and I can tell you as someone, I volunteered at the Raptor Center up at Minnesota. I do education work with a local raptor educator here. This is has a real impact on birds. Is like when people find a chick out of the nest and then what they choose to do once that happens. So I want to be upfront. You might think, return a baby bird to its nest, that parents will smell your scent and reject it. And that's just not true. If you are a mouse or hamster, or even like elk babies, that could be true. But most birds don't really rely on their sense of smell to be able to identify their babies. They're going to use the specific calls and vocalizations to identify them. You know, if you're going to things that would cause a parent bird to leave and abandon their chicks would be like a high level of disturbance. So again, that goes back to the code of conduct, but it's not smell. So you might be thinking, okay, so what should I do? I want to help this baby I found. It could die, which it could. So it's going to really depend on kind of the situation. So you probably saw earlier that, like Lydia said, like really strongly recommend not handling birds if possible, but there's a couple of, you have some options generally. Like if you see a bird like that's out of the nest. So if is it injured, absolutely call wildlife rehab. Call someone who can give that animal the medical attention it needs ASAP. If it's a hatchling, like, and you can see the nest, if you can just quickly as possible put that nestling back in, like, and keeping in mind where the parents are, what's happening, do that. If not, you can try to if you can't reach it, putting it in a space where it would be safe, but that it could still end up getting into the nest, like, that's a possibility. I won't take you through all of these. This is a great graphic from actually the Audubon Society, but after all, like, even, and this is even what I would do, is I'd call it a local wildlife rehabber, because generally they're going to have more experience and more insight on how to deal with that situation. And you can talk them through what you're seeing, and they can talk you through how to proceed if they need to come out. Now you may be thinking, why don't I call my local vet, and why don't I call animal control? Two reasons. One, very few vets so vets will sometimes take in injured animals, but a lot of the time, like, it's very rare, at least I would say not rare, but uncommon, especially if some of you own exotic pets, for a vet to have extensive experience with bird anatomy. And so you're less likely, they may just not really be able to do anything for that animal, or they might not be the most informed. And the reason not to call animal control is literally animal control will not come if you call them, because they don't come rescue injured animals. They just don't. The goal of animal control is, like, think of it like a government, essentially, health measure. It's to prevent, wild animals that might have, like domestic animals like cats and dogs that might have diseases like rabies, from being around, and preventing their, like, areas from having, like, nuisance domestic animals running around. So animal control is not going to be your best option. There's a lot of great resources actually right here in Iowa City and across Iowa. Iowa State has a great listing of those rehabbers. But these are all places that are pretty close to us around here. I 10 out of 10 recommend the Rare Group. They do amazing work. They're obviously right here. And they're very available. So if you have an emergency, call them, and they are just a great resource.
All right. So if you can't tell by now, there are a lot of challenges to having a nest box, but we think it's totally worth it. That's why we're talking to you about it now. But there are lots of things that can happen with your nest box that are going to be very, very annoying, and that includes predators and competitors. And so the only way to really prevent that is to not live in a place where there's predators or competitors for nest boxes, but that's pretty much nowhere. So you're going to have to deal with it eventually. But luckily, there are several options for preventing this. And I want to stress that prevention is going to be your best bet, rather than a reaction to a really bad pesky squirrel that's always in your nest box, or a really pesky wasp nest. So prevention, really want to stress that, rather than reaction. So I will try to go over this fairly quickly because we are running out of time, but I'm sure you guys are familiar with lots of these and have seen these. Collars and stovepipes are really good for animals that are going to be climbing up the pole. Snakes, raccoons, squirrels generally are going to be climbing up, but they're not going to be able to if you have a collar on there or a stovepipe. Noel guard is really good for things that are going to be trying to reach into the whole cough, cough cats from the top of the nest box. So that's really, really good for preventing anything from being able to reach into there, but the bird can move in and out just fine. So that's called a Noel guard. Hole reinforcement. I have a metal reinforcement up here, but they don't necessarily have to be metal. It can be a really, really thick piece of wood. What squirrels really like to do, the annoying creatures they are, they like to come up to a nest box and then chew the hole big enough. If it's not big enough for them, they will take the time and the effort to chew that hole so that they can fit through it. That's really annoying. So if you have a metal reinforcement on there or a really, really thick piece of wood, well, they're not going to chew through metal, obviously, and they're not going to take the time to chew through a bunch of wood. So that's going to prevent those competitors from gaining access to the nest box and using it if you have that reinforcement. Another thing is soap. This is just a general bar of soap. This is really, really good to put on the top of your nest box. A thin layer is really only a thin layer is needed. And this is to prevent bees and wasps from getting a foothold on the top of the nest box so they can start a nest. If they can't get a foothold on top, then they're going to leave it alone and move on to something else. So real quickly, squirrels and mice. So mice do occasionally build nests in bird boxes, but before winter. So most people are not going to bother removing these nests because they're not overlapping with the breeding season of migrating birds. But you absolutely must take care to clean out the box in early spring if you want that nest box to be used by birds. So you don't need to stress or worry about removing that nest, but you need to clean it out. Squirrels, on the other hand, there they go, being pesky and annoying again. They are going to compete for nesting spaces and nest boxes with birds because their breeding overlaps with breeding of migrating birds. So I will say this, we think that squirrels are all nice and cute, but I absolutely do not recommend that you ever approach an active nest of squirrels because for one, I don't think you should risk a rabies shot or a bad trip to the ER because you may come across a very angry squirrel. And also, it is illegal. It is typically illegal in most states to remove an active nest. There are protections in place for mammals like this, so absolutely just don't attempt to. Like I said, prevention rather than reaction is best. So take care to use those predator guards and to use other tactics to prevent squirrels from being pesky on your nest box.
Just one note, like Lydia said, squirrels breeding season overlaps with a lot with when birds are building nests. So that means that if you were to try to to take out the nest, you might actually have infant squirrels in there and would be potentially sentencing them to death essentially because you're disrupting that. So just don't mess with squirrels. Besides, those babies haven't yet gone to their full annoying adult level. Give them a chance to.
Yes, and we're talking about starlings and house sparrows. So these are invasive species, and people generally can harass them and kick them out of nest boxes. They're not protected by the Migratory Bird Act, so um, although we do not recommend harassing any sort of wildlife or birds, but starlings and house sparrows honestly can be particularly annoying because they are competitors for nest boxes. There's several different ways to control these. Passive control would be something like placement, not placing them where European starlings and house sparrows are at. Place the box somewhere else. Avoiding feeding, don't put out birdseed mix. So that's going to be kind of more passive. Active control, so they're, like I said, not protected by the Migratory Bird Act, so you can remove those nests if you so choose. Granted, we'll be honest with you and blunt that if you remove the nest, you might have to remove that nest several times before the bird is like, okay, I'll move on. But honestly, you're gonna have to do it several times because they just are so they just want it their way and they want that nest there and they don't care what you say. House wrens, on the other hand, are protected by the Migratory Bird Act. You may not remove those nests, absolute no-no. But what you can do is move the nest box away from any shrubby areas, because house wrens really do love shrubby areas after the breeding season is over, obviously. And you can also place a nest box specifically for house wrens if you just want to avoid that competition. Oh, cats. Okay, let's talk about cats. I love cats. They honestly, they bring me so much joy, but this statistic here brings me absolutely no joy. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but cats kill around 2.4 billion birds each year. That is just insane. So yeah, let's talk about ways that we can deal with cats, because this is a very insane statistic. So there are several different ways. 100% effective is to keep cats indoors. Absolutely, no problem, no stress. Although if you're like me, I would feel a little bad, right? Because they're animals, they like to be outside and enjoy nature and hunt around for things. But the problem is that they hunt too much. They're just so active, and they just love harassing birds that it's a serious problem. So if you cannot keep your cat indoors, there are a lot of ways that you can kind of deal with this problem. So using predator guards, placing nest box away from trees. We have a list kind of on the side here, but what I really want to talk about is these collars and cat bibs, because they're just so funny and awesome to me. So these birds be safe collars that you can put on your cat. It kind of looks like they're about to join the circus or something, but the reason for the bright coloration and that pattern on that collar is birds can see in UV light. So the colors on this collar are really gonna pop. They're just gonna bam. All right, there's a cat there. Okay, great, I can get away. The pattern on the collar is also important, because that's gonna be a pattern that is super easily recognizable. I don't know about you guys, but I've been terrified of cats before, because they just come out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere, jumping from the refrigerator, jumping into the closet, just crashing, running over things. And it's like, where did that come from? So they're very sneaky, right? And this is how they are able to catch these birds. It's like they just sneak up on them, and no one knows what happened. So if they have this collar on, it's going to be really effective. It's going to let the bird know, hey, a cat's coming, I better get out of here. Another thing is a cat bib. So this does not impede the cat in any way, except when a cat is trying to pounce on a bird, it's going to make it much harder for them to do that. Does not impede movement otherwise. So if you do have cats and they are outside, absolutely think about these options. And I also really want to stress loud bells. That is another really cheap, inexpensive way to keep cats from killing birds. Very loud bells. So
And just to add one thing, also both of these collars, there have been independent studies done that show they dramatically reduce the amount they catch birds. The bird safe collar reduced it by 19 times, and I think the cat bibs did by 87%. Neither of them impede the cats in any way, and it was like only like one cat in the cat bib study was like able to never keep it on, and they're not even sure how. So these are really effective, and they're like $10. There's absolutely no reason to not do it. And so, I mean, we're reaching our end, folks. I'm sorry to say, but then again, we've gone over time, so I guess I'm sorry about that too. So when the party's over, to quote the great beloved Billie Eilish, it's time to clean. So, and actually, let me clarify. When you want to wait till you know that those birds are gone. So these are some fledgling kestrels, so you want to wait till those birds are gone, and that so those fledglings they've flown off, they're out on their own, and the parents are gone, and then wait to clean. So I recommend October is a great time. You can be pretty certain that none of the nestlings that you have are going to be there. And just making sure you do that in a safe way, because you're going to want to use gloves and you're going to want to use a dust mask because to avoid exposure to avian diseases. I don't think anyone wants to see Iowa City have an outbreak of bird flu on top of everything else we're already dealing with in Johnson County. And I'm sure you don't want to have the experience of bird flu. I haven't heard great things, I'm going to be honest. So keep that in mind. And then if you want, you can disinfect with hot soapy water or bleach solution, but be super duper careful with bleach. It's corrosive. And so really keep to like just 1 part bleach to 9 parts water and rinse it super thoroughly. Like I said, I worked at the Raptor Center. I also work with a local Raptor education group. Honestly, if you can power hose down a box, like it's amazing how much bird poop can come off with just some like not doesn't even have to be super hot, like just a good blast of water. Things I know from cleaning up a lot of bird poop. And so and then once you do that, check your nest box in early spring to see if you need to clean again, because like we said, you might get something that like a mouse nest in there from the winter, or there might be some dirt and debris in there from from winter roosting birds. And after that, once you've got all that done, just get excited for the next nesting season. As a girl from Chicago, I grew up with the policy of being a Cubs fan of there's always next year. So always be excited, because like every year is a new adventure. And that's all we have, guys. So please stick around if you have questions. I can see that there's a bunch of questions in the chat, and Lydia and I would love to answer them. Like I said, well, Lydia and I basically haven't been able to stop thinking about bird boxes, for nest boxes.
So Darcy, there's a question that just came up from Susan Hagen. She says, what exactly do you mean by early spring?
Good question. I didn't really get, so I would say early spring for cleaning. Don't do it while there's a risk of freezing, but I would say if you can start, and hopefully you don't have to clean that much in early spring, but trying to get out if you can in like February, January, or March. Actually, January is not really spring at all, but like February or March would be a really good time. Like I said, early March is like, that's pretty much absolutely the last point to check to make sure it's cleaned out. Okay, let's see. Oh, you're getting so many more questions. Should we start from the earliest one, Lydia, or?
Oh, nope, we can start from Fred Meyer here. He says, I have raccoons in my neighborhood. Do they pose a danger to birds or eggs? If so, got any top tips for preventing them from accessing a box that's attached to a tree?
I do have some tips. So Lydia did a great job talking about this. So the good thing about raccoons is they're so smart, frustratingly smart. Just go ahead. Toronto has a raccoon population that's beaten just about every trash can design they've made, even to like prevent raccoons. So the best way I would say to do it would be to get like one of those, I'm just going to call it a baffle. It's just going to be something that's going to go on the bottom of, like, if you're doing a pole based bird nest box, something that's going to prevent them from coming up. In terms of them coming from a tree, and this is true of cats too, I would say it's a pretty similar thing, but with cats as well. If you're going to put a nest box by a tree, try to put it away from branches, like that would be close by and easy for the raccoon or cat to get on. And then, like, I don't know if Lydia highlighted or not, but like you can also make like I'll just pull this out. If you want to like to see how this roof of the nest box slopes out, if you make this at least 5 inches away, an animal that's going to be here and trying to reach in, if it's really far sticking out, can't reach it. Or you could put like that Noel guard on the front. And that's pretty much like, yeah, like, and that should be pretty good. Like, I mean, I personally never underestimate raccoons. Like, they're intelligent customers, believe me. So, but that's about the best way. Like,
yes.
So what kinds of birds can I expect to see commonly nesting around these parts?
Oh wait, there's before Galen, there's a question from Jack is, how do you get bird boxes in the ground Now the ground is frozen. Should we wait until the ground thaws?
I know why Jack is asking this question personally, but that's a good question. It's not an easy one to answer. I would wait till even it doesn't even have to be till like the ground is super thawed through, but even just like on a warmer day, you can probably get in. Like that's part of why they also recommend doing in the fall or spring putting them in. Um, admittedly don't know as much about that, but there should be ways to get it done. Um, but like I might do some internet research or just talk with you after this session, Jack.
Let's do about 2 more questions. So if anyone has any last ones, get them in real quick. We might have time, but let's do the next 2 here.
Like
From
Lydia, I'm
Galen.
happy to stay on and answer them if you got to go. Like just, I'm
Okay.
happy to be the bird nerd. So, from R. McFarla. So let's see. We plugged our bluebird box entrance last fall to keep out mice. It appears the woodpeckers have drilled a new hole on the side. Now that one I haven't heard recently. Do you think the woodpeckers might be using it for nesting this spring? I think there's a good shot, honestly. I mean, depending on what type of woodpecker you have, like you may have been focusing on for bluebirds, but now you're supporting local woodpeckers. So like Lydia kind of gave a good example is like one way when you have a non-target species like that, that's, native, that, you don't want to necessarily harass. If like the woodpeckers are going to use it for the spring, make another bluebird box. That's unfortunately the best thing I can bet for you to do. Like just because then you don't have to worry about kicking out a native bird. And who knows, I can't guarantee, maybe they'll be like, well, I drilled this hole, but I think I need some pricier residence for myself. I don't know. I'm not a woodpecker real estate agent. But that would be what I recommend, is just putting it on all, like letting them have it if they're going to use it, and then making another bluebird box. Galen, I will not answer right now. He's a friend. For those who are like, why wouldn't you answer this nice boys question? Oh, thank you, Phyllis. Thank you. What exactly do I mean by early spring? Let me see.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there was a question earlier about putting nest boxes on burrow land, and we would just say refer to Carter for that one. And so we are actually caught up on the questions. So
Yeah.
wait.
I would say, like, again, Carter is the head of our stewardship team. Like, if you want to do that, our goal as a land trust is ultimately to restore the land to a quality that birds will naturally nest there. But we've been playing around with the idea. And if you would like to make a box and donate it, just reach out to us and that can potentially do it. But also, just the last note, please don't go onto private land you don't own and build a bird box and put a nest box there. That's just trespassing. And like, don't do it. Like, come on. I don't want any of you guys in jail. So that's pretty much all I got. You can always contact me or Lydia at Burr Oak Land Trust. Our emails are on there, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions or want to say hi. All of that.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation.